Hey friends and music makers, welcome to the final episode of my music theory for electronic producers, that's you, series. So today we're going to try and tie everything together that we've looked at in the last weeks. That was rhythm, bass, harmony and melody. And we're going to tie that into one comprehensive kind of roadmap for your productions. I'll show you how to steal like a composer, moving from kind of rigid theory rules to more creative freedom with a practical Ableton Live example. So you'll see how all these elements work together to create an emotional and memorable piece of music. So as always, drop your questions in the chat as we go. My goal is to help you bridge the gap between understanding music theory and actually using it in your productions. So let's dive in and do a little bit of a test first, make sure everything's working fine. So hopefully microphone's already good. Let's just jump over into the arrangement view, have a little run through of a track, and we'll just check all the levels. If you're already in the stream, do feel free to let me know that, or just drop a thumbs up if the microphone is good, and let's have a bit of music, make sure that is also good. Yeah, so it's all looking good this end. Hopefully all good your end as well. As I said, if any hiccups along the way or audio levels or microphone levels aren't working, please do let me know in the chat. Welcome. Feel free also to drop any comments in the chat as we go. So looking at what we've explored in the last 4 weeks, which was a response to that poll that I put on YouTube asking, the audience, community, you guys and girls, what would you like to know, or what firstly do you struggle with most with music theory? And you could choose from melody, harmony, bass, or rhythm. It was interesting to see the results, but in the end, everything suggested, let's do a series and let's kind of dive in and take a look at all those topics one by one, which is what we've done over the last 4 weeks, and last week was melody. So if you haven't seen any of those videos, there's a playlist on my channel with all the videos in it, and you can sort of go back and, as I said, work your way through them. And we started in sort of chronological order as well, kind of like you may well approach doing many of your tracks. Hopefully you've seen though along the way that when it comes to a bit of music theory and it comes to starting your tracks, I'm sure many of you already know there is no rule book. We can throw a rule book out the window. We can start really our idea with anything you like, samples, vocals. You can begin with the melody, you can begin with the bass, you can begin with the drums. There is no rules. And I wanted to talk a bit about that today because in the end, I am somebody who believes in a bit of understanding of music theory is a good idea. It's helped me a lot, and that's why I want to help you guys and girls. I mean, I've been through many of the pain points where you get stuck or you want to, create this sort of certain emotion or feeling for your listeners, or you want to do something that translates in a club and you're not sure how to do that. So everything I've done in this beginner friendly series has been about helping and sharing everything I've kind of understood about those things, and also teaching it to others how it kind of to break that down in hopefully simple, easy to understand terms. So what we want to do today is tie it all together, make a practical example here, pick some music, work on it a bit, and put everything into practice. So a quick little recap of all those different categories of musical theory. And as I said, they're not rules, right? They're just a map. And so once you understand that map, you can then break those rules, but you kind of understand you're not trapped in this cycle of randomness that, maybe what you do comes up with something cool. Maybe that sequencer spits out something cool, or maybe you got lucky. You know, you want to sort of have something that you can lean on and then work from that as a base, have a roadmap. Like I said, not a rule book. That's not really what music theory is, and I think people get confused about that sometimes. It's not a set of rules you have to stick by, but great if you understand a bit about it. All right, so what we're going to quickly look at here is things that we want to try and avoid, which we'll always kind of look at as we go. Too much repetition, balance of repetition versus variation. So that's always going to be important. Doesn't really matter what we're doing, whether it's rhythm, harmony, melody, or any of all and above. We're always looking for this kind of balance of repetition versus variation. Too much variation, chaos, not enough variation, boring and static, right? So we want to kind of push between those two elements. All elements playing at the same time, that's not going to be particularly good. That ties also into complementary, not competing. If everything was happening at the same time in our projects, everything's going to be competing with each other. So we want to space things out. We want things to be having a conversation with each other rather than all piling on top of each other. I just mentioned a moment ago, static or boring, getting stuck in a loop. We don't really want to do that either. And we don't want to overthink or overcomplicate things. Often when you look back at last week's melody video, it's often simplicity that's the key. Also one here I've thrown in, sound design versus melodic content. So last week we looked at that a bit. Instead of going down the rabbit hole of sound designing stuff at the very beginning, can be nice to come up, particularly with music ideas, with the music that speaks for itself, the emotion, the feeling behind it, that it works on a piano, that it sounds good musically, and then we take it over to our fancy synths and plugins and all that good stuff. So let's pop over to the arrangement view. Perhaps we'll work it here today so you can kind of see the different layers coming together and how they're going to interact with each other. Remembering we want a complementary result, not competing. And I'm thinking, like, if I was to write down on a piece of paper right now a certain emotion or feeling, so I think for today's example, it makes sense to do something that has a bit of emotional feeling, not too underground or twisted or too sound designy. We can do plenty of those on the channel, but something that sort of ties the use of the bass, the melody and the harmony and everything together. So let's say we're picking a key or a scale or a genre where we can kind of get those things working and get our listeners to feel something. So I think I like to work in minor keys. A lot of electronic music is in minor keys, but again, you can choose major up here and you can choose modes, which might be something we could touch on today. In fact, we could pick a mode, let's say. So rather than just a major or a minor scale, we could work today with a mode, a modal scale. We've also got our notes on the piano and our different keys. So let's say we do something like D Dorian. That would be a mode. And so let's say we're going to start with writing in D Dorian today. And again, if I was putting on paper emotion, I know that D Dorian, from my experience, is kind of an interesting scale because it's one that gives emotion, can give emotion. It can give this feeling of like sort of a bit melancholic but hopeful. So it kind of balances the yin and yang between bright and hopeful and a bit melancholic. So there's a nice bit of tension and rub in the Dorian scale. So we can explore modes a bit more in the future if you like. So let's say that we throw in a MIDI clip on this empty track here. So let's see if we can get that happening. There we are there. Let's just undo the scale button for a second. And just to point out with modes, so if we do the C major scale, okay, which looks like this, all the white notes from C to C, and let's keep going up. So we've got at least 2 octaves of C major, right? So that is, let's just say that we've got our scale awareness on up the top here in Ableton and it's showing C major. And if we click scale, we can make sure we don't have any wrong notes here. We're all correct. And it's a nice, easy one along with A minor. Those 2 keys and scales are all white notes only, so great places to learn. So we've got 2 octaves here of C major. If you want to do the modal scales, which are Dorian, Mixolydian, Lydian, Locrian, what else have I missed? Aeolian, Ionian, all of these good sort of terms, and Dorian, basically they're built on a C major scale, but starting from a different note. I missed actually another favorite of mine of the modal scales, which is Phrygian. So if you simply kind of have this pattern here and you start from the D going up now to the next D, you're in D Dorian. That is D Dorian, that selection of notes right there, right? And because we've copied up another octave, you can see that we're going to go from D to a D, but it's that shape. So the shape I'm talking about is when we unfold it, it's the intervals that we're going to get and the chords, where the chords are landing as we go through those intervals, that make it D Dorian, right? And if we sort of took away the D and we started from the E and went to the E up here, we'd be in E Phrygian. So that's a little way you can find your way around the modal scales, and they can be fun to try actually, because you can use keys and scales that are outside of the minor major combination and they sound a bit different. So let's do D Dorian, as I said, for something a little bit different. So that's going to be our scale today, and so we can get rid of this C and we can get rid of all those extra notes. And if we go up here and we put D on and we put Dorian, fingers crossed, we have all those notes in our scale, which we do. And funnily enough, a lot of these modes, once again, they're white notes only. So not only do you have A minor and C major as scales that you can get very familiar with just playing white notes, if you play from a D up to a D only white notes, then you are playing a white note only scale that's D Dorian. Right, so let's say that's what we're going to work with. We'll bump it out over here, old school way, put it outside the piano roll so we can see the notes that we've got just one octave of here. So our root note D. So let's plug in the chords that we're going to have available to us, right? So we're going to have a D chord, we're going to have an E chord, right? We're going to have an F chord. So we're just going to quickly look at the positioning of all of these. So we can just kind of see, we're going to have a G, hang on a sec, I'm going to keep that. Okay, G, we're going to have an A, we're going to have a B, and we're going to have a C, and then finally we're going to turn back around to the D again, right, in an octave's time. And if we leave the piano roll open like this, we're going to be able to see the different chord qualities and their positioning. So chord 1 is going to be the D, the F, and the A. That's chord 1. And straight away, going back to our harmony video we looked at earlier on in the series, this is a minor. So we're starting with D minor, and I can tell by that interval there of 3 semitones, 0, 1, 2, 3, counting up all the keys in between those two. And again, we're making triads, we're playing a note in the scale, skipping one, playing, skipping, playing. Okay, chord 2 is an E. If we go up, we're going to play the G and the B. So chord 2 in this scale is another minor chord, E minor, right? And so on. So if we go to F, A, and then to the C up here, playing and skipping, we've now got a major chord. So that's the 4 semitone interval that we're looking for when we see a major chord. G, B, and D gives us the G, that's also major, A, C, and then if we skip the D, we're up here on the E, so that's another minor. So we've already done our 3 minors, D, E, and A minor in this scale of D Dorian, F major, G major. So B, it's going to be our friend, let's not give it away just yet, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. That doesn't want to be that note. So D, and then we're skipping here and putting in an F, and then C up here. We're going to skip the D, put in an E, and then we're going to end up with the G up here, right? So playing and skipping that formula all the way through. So C, last major. So you can see we've got some nice major chords here. G, F and C are all major. And here's our little black sheep chord landing on the B. So if you're kind of also looking at something here, if we're now doing a chord progression, which we will do in a second here, our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chord, our 6th chord is the diminished chord here. In C major, that would be the 7th chord. Here, it lands on the 6th. So interesting, and our 7th is a C major. So that's the interesting thing we're getting from having this scale in play. So let's duplicate that across, and we can again get rid of all this stuff over here if we like. And now we can just kind of get to work building our chord progression. So why don't we do something here where we start with a 4, which would be our G. So we can copy that over. See here, so let's start with chord 4 as our first chord in our chord progression, right? So we're going to write a chord progression here, chord 4. Let's have, after chord 4, chord 5. So we're going major to a minor. So let's do that. Let's have A minor coming afterwards, right? Stretch that across there. Then let's say we've gone 4, 5. Let's bring that B into play. Let's have the B in here as well. So we're going to have a 6 in there. Just make sure if you're doing what I'm doing, that when you're dragging it across, you kind of obviously keep everything nice and together, so nothing's kind of going too out of shape here. So we're in D Dorian, that's our start. It's going to be on our emotional kind of platform for this video today. So let's also kind of move this again further across. So let's do all of that. So let me just get it right in the crosshairs. And then I'm lined up properly there. Let's duplicate that over again. And then we can kind of bump this one off. And then let's do this one here. So our first 3 chords. Let's kind of do another bar of those. But on the second bar, let's have a change. So let's make this so here we have 4, 5, 6. Here, let's do 4, 5, 1. So that's going to bring into play the 1 chords. So let's delete that chord there. Let's bring this chord in over here. Make sure you keep it in the right place. So that's going to give us the 1 chord, which is going to mean that when this loops around, actually, the 1 chord is going to join up here with the 4 chord. And that can be a nice kind of progression there, because that's the hidden chord progression here, is this final chord. Right, so all of this to build a chord progression. Let's drop that note down as well. Perhaps we'll re-voice it a little bit. So we've got kind of a different voicing. And now let's kind of stretch this out. Just for now, we'll have this pattern like so. Okay, and then let's pop some sort of instrumentation on it. Let's loop it up. Let's say perhaps we begin just with a piano just to play this back here, just for a second. So let's do that. By the way, I'm going to try today something a little bit new. I'll take regular pauses along the way. And if you have some particular question you want to ask, then please do let me know and I'll do my best to answer them. Just going to have a sip of tea while I'm having a pause. So if you think of a question to do with harmony and chord progressions and music theory, feel free to drop it in the chat. Also say hello in there, that's also fine as well. Let us know where you're tuned in and listening from, all those good things. Okay, so I'm looking down here just for a preset. Let's do the old upright piano by Spitfire Audio that comes in Ableton Live 12's packs. So let's drop that on there so we can listen back to our chord progression. Let's turn off this track that we used before as a test. In fact, we'll delete it. We don't need that anymore. Let's turn this track on, that will help a lot. Okay, so here we go. First dry run. We need to stretch it out as well, so it's going to go all the way over to here. So that's the chord progression we have in D Dorian, following that pattern. And again, if you don't want to use a piano, by the way, you know, very often I've sort of shown that I'll just use again, a simple synth in its default state, just so you can kind of get a little feeling for what's going on with the notes, but we don't really need to worry too much yet how it sounds. So one thing we haven't really covered in this series, I'm kind of happy with the movement of those chords. Okay, that is the 4, 5, 6, and then 4, 5 again, and then we've sort of gone with a 1 chord and we've revoiced it. So we've got a little bit of kind of this nice voice leading up here. We might leave that. We've got a common tone here, but it's not in the same place. We could revoice this chords quite a bit. We could do this, which would mean we've got common tone here in the same place, also in the middle. So these two chords now have common tones. So if we want to revoice, we've got no matching voices here at all, no matching common tones at all, but I kind of like the movement in it. And over here, in the final passage here, we've definitely got a common tone. So there's kind of two areas in this chord progression we don't, but I kind of would be leaving them. Let's have a listen to what it sounds revoiced with that note down, but I also like the kind of leading up here, how this moves up. Okay, so I'm just going to have one listen with it down, revoiced. Let's see. Yeah, no, so straight away that's not for my ear like that. So we're going to put that not that far up, right there. So that's the voicing of our chord progression for now. Something we haven't done so far in the series of rhythm, bass, harmony, melody. Okay, so today we're starting with chords and chord progressions because we're sort of saying D Dorian, we're looking at a piece of paper, we want hopeful, bright, an interesting emotion that our listener is going to feel, or our dancers, we want some sort of connection. Therefore, we've gone straight to the harmony or straight to some chords. We could do the melody and we would get something similar, but we've gone straight to chords. But something we haven't done so far in our series is harmonic rhythm. So let's look at that right now. And also let's just kind of observe rhythm for a second, because rhythm's really incredible in the sense that it's kind of important in every stage that you're working with. Doesn't matter if it's the drums, doesn't matter if it's the bass, doesn't matter if it's the melody, doesn't matter if it's the chords. The interesting thing is rhythm, out of all of those parts of music theory, it makes a difference right across the board. So I really want to bang on that, about that a little bit today, because actually whilst I was doing this series, it even dawned on me just how important rhythm is to all of the different stages or different parts of the music theory that you're working with. Rhythms right across the board. Last week we looked at melodies not really working if they didn't have a rhythmical kind of context to them. So really, really important stuff. So we're working on the emotion right now. What is harmonic rhythm? Well, harmonic rhythm would be taking what we have here, our chord progression for today, and moving it across. Let's also not have an error like that as well. So we're kind of missing the end of our chords there. So we want to watch out for that. Make sure that it does loop around properly. Okay, so let's work on this one over here for a moment, and let's look at harmonic rhythm for a second. So let's give it a different color. And what we're talking about when we're talking about harmonic rhythm is where these chords change, right? So right now they are changing like blocks exactly on the bar, right? Every time they change, they're changing on the beat. So if we put the metronome on, that would confirm that. So you can hear it every time the chords start, they're triggering on beat. So not much harmonic rhythm in here apart from that chord being a different length to this chord. So this chord's a bar long, this is 2 bars long. That is rhythm, but it's not really anything particularly special, right? So let's say that in this chord progression here, we're gonna change the harmonic rhythm a bit. Let's also maybe have some drums for a bit of context as well. so we can start to get a bit of a vibe happening here. I'm just going to use a loop for now. The drums are going to be the least important thing today a little bit. If we get time to work on them, we can, but we're just going to use a drum loop for a moment. And as I said, if we get stuck into drums later, we can. We did use drums in the rhythm part of this series, so if you haven't seen that video, go back and check it out. But like I said, for the moment, we're at 128 BPM, we're in D Dorian, and we're trying to get a bass line, a melody, and a chord progression to go with that. So let's just have a listen to it with the drums. And remembering that, as I said, the synth sound is not important either just yet. So what we could do is pull back this first chord, and we could say, let's make the second chord come in after, just before the bar starts, bar 2, and let's make it a 16th note. So we could do that chord change in an 8th note, so 2/16. It could change a quarter note all the way over to here, right? So you've got kind of lots of options. So if we're changing it at a quarter note, it's going to be like so, right? So I'm going to leave the grid in 16th notes, and we're just adding 4/16 to get our quarter here. So let's just listen to what that's done, and we'll also loop this up a bit shorter while we're working on it over here, just so we can come back a bit quicker. So let's have a listen to that. Okay, so let's change it now to 3/16. Eighth note. Right, so 8th note's quite smooth. So if you do 16th notes, you can add a lot more kind of spice. Think about your cooking, and 16th notes are kind of like a little bit more chili to the pot. And the same way we've got changes of where the chords start, we can also incorporate rests, which would be anywhere where we leave a space of silence of 16ths or 8th notes or something like that. So, you know, maybe here you have an 8th note rest, right? And then another one afterwards. So all of this is changing the harmonic rhythm of this, just very basically, but it is. So what we could do is also start chopping these chords up, right? So if we make this chord quite a lot smaller, and then we make a duplicate of it, and we bring that right into there, and then we bring that down, that would be like a little quarter note version of the same chord there. That's also going to affect the harmonic rhythm. It also depends a little bit on the synth, so we didn't really hear it as much. So let's make it maybe a bit more obvious. But we can adjust that a little bit also with our synth. It's just sometimes we're not hearing the start of that note so easily. But that sounds pretty cool. That's also where we're at it with all of these chords, the whole lot. Let's get in here and humanize it a bit, which is also coming back from last week that we looked at. So, or sorry, all the weeks. We want, if we're programming our stuff, for it to feel like it was played. Now, I'm fine playing keyboards. I was playing piano since I was very young, maybe 6 or 7 years old, grew up with a piano in the house, but it's nice also to see how you can make this work. If you're not a keyboard player or a pianist, you can program it in and make it kind of sound like you played it. And there's also great workflows where we can just play anyway and noodle around and just record it into Ableton and then work with that. So let's randomize all of this and let's get some vibe a little bit into that. We'll not make it too crazy, that is the velocity. We'll just have it a bit spread out like that. Okay, let's work on our second section. Let's loop it all up and let's have a little play. Okay, so it's starting to come together, right? We might also split this one in half, I think, but we're just putting a bit of rhythm into it. So that's one example of harmonic rhythm where we're starting to incorporate little rests. We're moving things in front of the bar. And if we have everything on beat, like we started, so let's do a shootout. So we're going to have our two chords now side by side, our two chord progressions. The pink clip, the first one we worked on, well, everything is block chords and they're landing on the beat, on the strong beats. Let's also make that a little bit more so it's a fair shootout. So there's a bit of variation in the velocity. Let's hit play. And let's have our drums across as well. Right, so it makes a difference. It's kind of got something else going on. I'm going to close up that rest here. Again, the synth choice we make might affect a little bit where the start and end of each chord happens, but for now we're trying to write the chord progression. So another option would be using a lot of the tools we have in Ableton Live would be to copy that chord progression over to here. And then we're going to do another example of it. And in this one, what we could do, so we're taking our block chords again that we sort of started with. There's our chord progression, revoiced a little bit. So let's say with this that we change our grid in the background to either eighths or quarters. Let's go with eighths, and then we can select all the notes in Ableton, and on a Mac, it's going to be Command E, and that's going to do this. So if you're making music like progressive house and those kind of genres, or your idol could be someone like deadmau5, this is the kind of thing he's going to do with his chord progressions. He's going to have the notes triggering the chords like this. So now we're going to have a lot of harmonic rhythm in the chord progression because they're all changing on eighths. So it really just depends what you're looking for, right? In terms of feeling, maybe you want a lot more harmonic rhythm in your chords and you're doing this, then you do want them just a sort of supporting more pad-like in the background, or maybe a mixture of both, because we could start also then editing and modifying these so they would become unique in their own right. But let's leave it like this. I'm going to work with the second clip. And I'm also going to change my synth now. I'm just going to tweak it slightly so that we've got a little bit more interest there. I'm sure if you're clicking in and watching the stream, you're thinking, oh, that doesn't sound too exciting. Well, it's not. We're just using very raw, just a basic, as I said, sine wave, really, just so we can kind of get our chord progression working properly. So let's move the ones we're not using out the way. And again, I wouldn't delete them as such because they might come in handy for variation. Maybe we move from this chord pattern here and this rhythm to this, right, later in the track. So maybe it comes later in a build-up or something like that, or we use it at the peak of the track. So that can work well, right? So now we're back in our main progression loop that we've chosen for now. As I said, we're just going to make it sound a little better. We're just getting a little bit of vibe into it. Again, maybe with this second chord we will try revoicing it. Third chord, should I say. No, definitely wants to stay up there for me. So what we might do is actually just change it slightly here, because this is our diminished chord from the scale, so it's a little bit kind of gnarly, so to speak. It's kind of that tense chord, so maybe use a little bit less of it. So we make a little bit of a change here, and we bring this over to here. So we have a little bit more of the E, and then we're going to sort of do something like that. Let me just put that back. Actually, we can do it easy enough here. Let's just extend that over and do that. Let's try that rhythm. We can hear how much tension this chord brings in, and it's the chord 6. As I said, it's kind of unique to Dorian, so we could also take away a bit of that tension. We've already used the C, that's the 7th chord. We haven't used it actually, we've used the 1 chord over here. It's just revoiced. So if we put in the C chord, so I'm just kind of massaging this a bit because it was a bit too tense for me there. So if we do that and we bring the G down, let's have a listen to that now. So what we can do then is we're continuing to develop our chord progression here. Maybe we are going to put this chord here, which actually I think I may have made a mistake, but we're going to check that in a moment. We're going to make this one the D, the root chord of our Dorian scale. So it should look like that. It's minor. And then what we're going to do is, again, we're keeping the harmonic rhythm we've got sort of going here, but we're kind of revoicing it a little bit just to get away from that maybe a bit too tense 6, which was the B. So just massaging again the voicing a little bit. So let's check what we've got here. So we're still on the chord, we're in D Dorian, that's our root note. We're on the 4th chord here in its natural position, it's G major. We're on the 5th chord, A minor, again in its natural position. We've changed the rhythm of that a bit, so we're looking at harmonic rhythm today that we haven't explored in our previous videos. And then over here, we've actually got an inversion, right? So we've got here the C, which is going to be, as I said, the 7th chord here. So this is the 7th chord of the scale, but it's in an inversion, and we're getting some common notes. So these two chords now have a common tone in the bottom of each chord. This is the same chord, so that's fine. There is no common tones here, but I like the movement of this sort of stepping up, okay, the voicing up. And we could also have that even sort of climbing up ladder wise if we wanted, like, not quite like that, but sort of probably with the G up if we want, but we'll leave that down because I like this movement now. And then over in the second bar, so this was kind of the first 4 bars over here. And then the second bar, we've got the same thing. We're doing 4 to the 5. And now we've added a bit of a difference here. So we're going over here into a new chord voicing again, which is just giving us a little bit of a, as I said, a variation in there. So the A is, which chord number is that? So sometimes you have to check in on this. So 7, 6, 5. Yeah, it's the 5th. So we're back on the 5th there. And then we've kind of changed it a little bit here, the voicing. So just always remember, folks, that the N chord in this loop here is coming back around to meet with this one. And in this case, it was the D in an inversion. So again, it's the root chord of the scale, D minor with an inversion. So we're playing chord 1 here. That's coming around to the 4. Just to point that last bit out there. It can look a bit confusing once you start voicing things. So that's what we've got on our chords. And we've got a bit of rhythm in there, which is interesting. So we're not just working with block chords. So what we'd need to do already is, if we're going to do something else, we'll need to reuse this as the master plan now and duplicate that across rather than the previous clip we had. But once again, you know, this I would not delete because, again, it might come in handy for a variation where we use that B, this chord. That sort of more tense one there. So we could say, I don't delete things generally. Maybe we'll be using it. Okay, so let's say now we investigate some melodies and basses to go with this. So let's get a new MIDI track going and let's copy these chords down into it like so. And then what we're going to do is kind of get the chord progression as the template a bit, and we're going to move it down into sort of bass territory down here. And we're going to start by kind of like getting rid of a bunch of notes. So actually changing my mind here. So let's say other way around, even though it's up in the track where it is, that is that we can refer to the actual chords. Let's say that we leave this up here. Probably go down 1 octave like there, and we're just going to use that as a template, right? So we're going to duplicate it, and we're going to make sure that our first chord lands on the G down here. So we're going to do this, right? And then these top ones up here, we certainly don't want to hear any of those. Okay, it's just showing us where our chords are, where they're changing, what's going on with them in the chord clip. Okay, like so. And we're also going to mute these notes down here. Like so. And we're going to kind of work with what we've got here a little bit. So let's kind of feel out a bit of a change here, a bit of a sort of flow between the different notes. We could actually go up to there. So thinking about this maybe as a very basic bass line idea that's following the bottom of the chords, right? So that's kind of what we're doing here. We're copying down, you know, our chords from above and saying, okay, you know, let's follow a bit what they do, right, down here in the bass. And we know that then all of those notes that are currently available that are highlighted are chord tones. They're from the actual chords that we've got above in our chord progression. So I hope that makes sense. Let's throw something on there again to give it some sound. So let's give an analog to that for now, or a drift actually could be interesting, but let's say analog for now. So that's just following the rhythm that we've got in the chord progression, the harmonic rhythm we created there. We're not going to stick with that. I mean, sometimes again, the most basic bass you might have would be a root note bass that follows exactly what the chords are doing and all chord tones. So again, these are all chord tones, right? Hopefully that makes sense. We're using notes that are all in the chords above. So I'm actually going to take the liberty now to delete all of these ones right above. So they're out the way, because we might still experiment with other chord tones, right? So these are other chord tones available to us as we go along, right, up in here. So let's do something a little bit different. So let's say that we've got the chord tones and the ones that we kind of like here revealed at the moment. And let's do something where we go up to Ableton and let's invert those. So that's going to mean that we're asking it to sort of flip in reverse what the chords are doing versus what the bass is going to be doing, right? So the bass is now following the reverse pattern to what the chords are doing. Okay, so let's have a listen to that. So I would say for now, even though it's a raw sound, that is kind of an option, right? And if we assign that color over there to the clips, we'd be able to sort of like bring these two clips together. So what we're going to do is open one, so we can kind of see what's going on, hold down Shift and select the other, so that we've got that kind of comparison, right? And so as you can see here, as we're going up, now we're going down in the bass, right? And then when this comes down, we go up. And when this is going up, we're going down. And we've reversed it, we've flipped it. That's a popular move. It's called contrary motion. So we've now got contrary motion between our chords and our bass idea, let's say. So we're trying something new here. We haven't explored that in previous videos either. Let's bring down the bass, like lower in octave. Okay, let's listen to that. And we don't want to hear any of So one of the first things we could do is a little bit like we did over with these chords. We can kind of chop now this bass idea into rhythm. But again, if you want to copy it over, maybe you want to do one bass where it kind of plays all through long notes like this. And maybe what you do actually is you even join some of these notes here. So they're very long. So we've got kind of a bit of a different kind of bass sounds here. Even we could join a few of those, even this common tone here. But then we're removing rhythm, right? We're just, with this, if we were playing this bass, we'd have just a very long, drawn out kind of not root note bass because it's already reversed, but alternative bass, let's say. So we'll call this 1, 2. And it's still going to follow our chords in the opposite direction. So, you know, we could play around actually with some idea there. We could take this, which is the chopped up chord progression, and well, actually, it's a different chord progression. So let's do it with our main one, because this was the original idea we had, and we have since changed. We've changed a bit of a chord around. So let's say in this copy here, we do what we did earlier. We put our grid in the background into eighth notes, and then we take all of our chords here, Control E on a Windows or Command E on a Mac. And now we've got a fast moving chords up here with a slow moving bass. Let's also, just because it is a bit too low, let's get this up an octave. We'll do the same with our other bass over here. Okay. So interesting, because we're already using those different rhythms, right? So this is our main chord progression that we like, that we've voiced harmonic rhythm, we've changed around. We've got a version of it over here that we've chopped up into eighths, a little bit sort of dead mouse kind of looking. And then now we've got two bass lines, one where we're sort of following the same harmonic rhythm as the chords, but we've made it contrary motion, and this one which now we've slowed down the rhythm in places. So all of these things are valid. They're all possibilities, right? I think we still have the strongest combination here at the moment. So again, these are ideas, right? And the more ideas you create like this, we're not deleting any. This was an earlier chord progression that we've since moved a little bit from, but we don't delete it. We put it over here because it could be a change in the song. It could be an area that we go to that instead of what we're doing. All right, so let's make again this bass a bit more interesting now. So what we could do over here is, similarly, we can slice it all up. Again, I'm changing the grid in the background. Let's say we do 16th notes. So we want to go quite small, and then we're going to choose all the notes and Command E. So that's going to be the starting point here. And actually, again, before I do that, let me make a copy of it. I think it's wise, so that we've got a place to come back to, and all these variations and ideas for now, they can, as I said, move across a bit. But we're creating things in the bank that we may or may not use, but there's no harm at all. So on this one, now we're going to do that. Slice it all up, not just that bit. Okay. And let's work on our sound just a little bit, so it sounds like a bass as well. And let's grab a preset for here, maybe something like a pad or something along those lines, just so this is, again, moving it towards a territory where you might go. You might go and say, okay, I've got a favorite kind of particular pad or something that I'd like to use on those chords. So the contrary motion in here was already interesting. Now we've got kind of it all chopped up into 16th notes. This is our bassline idea down here. And so it's moving different to the chords, which I like. It's walking opposite ways at times, which I think is already interesting. It's different, right? We haven't seen that in previous episodes. Now let's kind of work on the rhythm a bit. and make it sort of a little bit more interesting, again, applying all the things that we've learned along the way. So let's kind of basically, inside of the chord progressions, let's loop it up small and do it sort of chord by chord as we go along here. And you can also, sort of shown this before as well, you can set markers up the top here, if you like. It can be a good way sometimes, so you can kind of see also over here the arrangement views where your chords are changing, and you can even write the chord names above. It's a handy little hack or little way to do that, so you can kind of see your rhythm up here, and you can even then write, you know, in there instead of the number that this is a minor, right? And so you can kind of make some notes for yourself about what you're doing up in each chord. Okay, so coming back here, we're going to loop this up small, and we're just going to do it section by section and see if we can find just like kind of interesting little rhythm in here that's different to just what we've got. We could work with what we've got, and let's start to make it a bit more interesting. And what we're going to do here is we're going to play around with note lengths, short and long, use a different sets of notes. We've just got 16ths here. We're going to mix that up. We're going to play around with on beat. So on beat, this is on beat, this is on beat, this is on beat, this is on beat. It's all landing where our strong beats are. Okay, so we're going to have sometimes notes landing there and sometimes not. So let's start already with those ones muted. So it's already okay rhythm-wise. The next thing we can do with the bass line, which we've been looking at as we've been going along, is play around with chord tones or passing tones. So what do I mean by that? So we've got a bit of rhythm now, we've got a difference to the chord progression, we're starting to get a bass that's kind of doing its own thing. We could also move some of our notes. These would be the other chords, the other notes that are chord tones, and then we can also use notes that are in the scale that are outside of the chords, right? So the other notes of the chord are C and A. So by this I mean, you know, this note here could be a C or it could be an A. It could also be an A up here or a C, right? So that would be a chord tone. So let's drop it down to the C for a second. That already makes that kind of interesting, right? Sorry. I like that. So I'm using another chord tone. And if I put it on the the B, that works as well, but it's not a chord tone. So the difference between this note that's originally up here moving around, here it's following the root of the chords above. Here it's taking another note out of the chords, so it's moving to a different note, but it's still in the chord progression. We know that. That's what those other notes are around. They're showing us the template of what's going on up in our progression. And if we put it here, it's in scale, but it's not in the chord above. So we get a little bit of tension out of that. So this is great. This is a way to make this bass line be different bit by bit. So we've got rhythm into it, we've got an opposite motion to the chord, so it's sort of elevating it, right? Step by step. I like it in the chord tone. I like that, but I like that the most. So if we bring our chords in as well, and we get up here, we can see those two interacting with each other, right? So as the chord goes up in the progression, we're going down. We've now got the chord here, we're playing the root of it, the G. We're actually not, we're playing the E, which is the, what happened there actually? Oh, that's quite funny. Quite funny. So we've actually got a little bit of a non-chord tones down there. Must have moved it slightly out of position as I came down. So we're actually getting a more unique bass line because this is not actually exactly the same as the chords above. I thought I had it the same, but actually we don't. So that's kind of interesting. So we'll probably roll with that. It's all in scale. It's all fine. It's just actually doing already. I know why. It's because when we inverted it. So it's okay. It's like when I inverted everything, of course, it flipped and reversed those chords. So yes, it's actually making sense now. So previously it was all the same before I actually flipped the pattern. So all good. All right, so let's carry on. We've got that very first loop. I like it. The bass is a bit more interesting. So we're going to be a little bit more passing tones than actual chord tones because I inverted the bass so that it's going the opposite motion to the chord progression. You have to go back in time to check that out if you missed that bit. All right, let's move on to the second loop here and loop that up where the next chord changes. And we want also the bass to do the same. So as we're working on it section by section. So down here, we're going to skip along, and we could actually, let's open it up so we hear both. And that way we kind of can pay attention to what happens before and after. By the way, if you are here in the stream with me, do feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're tuned in and listening from. And of course, if you have any questions, I'm very happy to take a pause and answer any questions you may have about music theory or what we're doing here today. Just a bit of an example of putting together all the last week's videos into one. Quick sip of tea. All right, so loop back out. Bass and chord progression in progress. So we can kind of hear now already the bit we've worked on and the bit we haven't. So again, let's have no on beats for a second. Take away these notes. So what could be nice here is we make a little kind of cool motif. So we come up here and maybe up here. You can see I'm following notes in the scale, right? So I'm using sometimes notes that are in the chords that are playing above, and sometimes I'm grabbing other notes from outside of those chords, but they're still in our D Dorian scale that we're in today. Nice, so the bass is coming along now. We're starting to get something going. We're working on it sort of bar by bar below the chords, and we're kind of getting things. Now this little piece here, that's a little motive, a little pattern that kind of repeats. And there's another one sort of developing here a little bit. Those, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this bass line in a bit up to the melody. And this is going to be the template for the melody as well, because that could be the melody motive or one of them, just that little sort of section like that. So we're probably going to look at that in a moment. So let's now do continuation of our loop. Let's move it along to the next one. And similarly in our chords, we're going to do the same up here. So we need to zoom out a bit, and we're moving across to there. So we're doing the next little bit that leads on, and away we go. So we haven't had too much on beat yet. That's where I've sort of muted some of these notes. So again, let's do an on beat somewhere. Maybe we have it in the second. And again, we could do a little climb up here. So we're getting a really quite a melodic and kind of groovy bass line going along here. Let's have another little bit of a glued note here. changing the rhythm as we go. Nice. So we're developing a little bit here. Now also, if we take notes from outside of the scale, that's another thing I sort of showed in my bassline video in this series. You can also work with what's called non-diatonic notes, which would be anything that's not in the scale, like this note here. Daft Punk are great executors of that. It's quite tense in this particular track, but it could be an option. But I think a different genre than what we're doing today. We're doing sort of more melodic house, kind of getting into that type of territory. Right, so moving our loop along, working through this rhythm. We're doing it bit by bit. We're doing it very personalized in each section, so it's not like copy paste at the moment. We're kind of doing it so it's very unique. It's got its own feel. So now we're really traveling different to our chords, right? Nice. Put a bit more rhythm into here. Dr. Bones, a very good morning to you. Hope you're doing well, having a nice weekend. So here's our bass line. It's kind of progressing along. Let's loop it right out. And let's have a listen, the same with our chords, our first 4 bars of the chords now. And we've got sort of a unique bass. It's moving different to the chords above the chord progression we started with. We're in D Dorian, and we've now got a bass that's kind of doing its own thing, movement-wise and rhythm-wise. So we need to get this back over here. Let's start again timing-wise, so everything's together. Kind of like that so far. So let's kind of move across. Dr. Bones, sounds good. Sorry, I left that comment on your VST plugin video. I'm not sure I've seen it yet. Which video was that one you're talking about? Are you talking about the most recent one? Because in the end, I think it's been interesting to see the response to that. I think a lot of people haven't kind of got perhaps what the concept was about the idea behind it. But anyway, I'm not sure if that's what you mean, but let me know if that's the case. All right, so let's jump over here. And move along to the final sort of section over here. So we're going to loop up the next bit of our chord progression, the next 4 bars. I mean, again, we could make it, maybe what we'll do actually looking at the time here is we'll keep it kind of quite simple. Yeah, I'll read your comment later, Dr. Bones, but yeah, by all means, we're here live in the chat. Feel free to let me know what your thoughts were on it. But as I said, it's been interesting to see people reacting. And what we're talking about here is I have done just a normal video on the channel, not in the live stream, about a discovery I made of a chord sequencing application that has AI in its name, which is interesting. But literally, it does very much the same as Stacks in Ableton Live 12 or Scalar. There's really not a lot of difference. It's not writing chords for you. It doesn't spit out. It's a work with the tool rather than it doing it for you. And I think a lot of people don't watch the video or don't listen to what I spoke about in the video or what's in the description. I think it's the way forward. We're going to see lots and lots of tools like it because it's a collaborative tool. It's not doing anything for us other than suggesting this chord could work well with that chord, and you can choose to use that or not. That's all it's doing. That Stacks does exactly the same, so does Scalar. They just don't have AI in the title, so people see AI and they jump on it and go, oh, okay, it's doing it for you. There's no music theory skill. I played piano for 30 years, you know, so anyway, I'll let it go, but Yeah, it was some links to another creator who gives some guides on some similar things that can be created using only internal. Exactly, I've actually shown those on previous videos here on my channel as well. Stacks will do the same here, built into Ableton Live 12. But Stacks for me is not very user friendly, I have to be honest. It's one thing in Ableton I don't use a lot for creating my chords because I've found it, yeah, more uh, not say problematic, but it just wasn't easy to work with. So yeah, those tools have existed for a long time. If you go to a MIDI track and you open a new MIDI clip here, and you go to the generate tab and you go down to stacks, you can do exactly the same thing, and you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, or you can go plus generate, plus generate, plus generate, and there you have the same thing. Doesn't have AI in the title, and then you can revoice the chords, but here you're not even getting a suggestion of, oh, that might sound good with this particular type of chord. So yes, it exists already. It's just an alternative to those, and fair shout to the developer. I think to me it rivals Scalar. So if you've played around with Scalar, then you would understand, yeah, what Scalar is, and how what that chord sequence AI tool does is very, very similar to Scalar. All right, so coming back here, we had a 8-bar chord progression. Let's simplify it a bit just for today's video. Let's work with the first 4 bars. I'm just going to make sure they kind of do loop around okay, which they do. The final chord here shares a common tone with the first chord, so that's going to work. So here we go. And that means we can kind of keep the new bass line that we've come up with down here. Just changing a little bit, using notes from within the scale. Because I did like how it rose up before, but I was working with a different pattern then, but maybe we keep that sort of rise up because I was going to connect it around to here, but I think I kind of still like the sound of it up here. And what we could also do is kind of connect it a little bit here. That might be the way to do it. All right, so I think we've got a working bass now. As I said, we're kind of stripping ourselves down from an 8-bar chord progression to a 4-bar one, just so we're simplifying it a bit. What we've done, in case you're just jumping into the stream now, we've kind of come up with a chord progression. We're in D Dorian. We've copied the chords down. We've built a bass line out of it using, actually, what we did first was flip the bass so that it follows the opposite motion to the chords. So the chords are moving one way and the bass is a mirror of it moving the opposite way. So that's the first thing we did, was we reversed those. And now I've just kind of come up with a bit of a pattern that has a different rhythm and accesses different notes, some in the chords, so notes that fall in the chords, and some that are in scale but not in the chords. So that's what we've kind of got that we're working with for the moment. Let's actually delete some of this other stuff that's unnecessary around. Just get it out the way, because what we're going to do now a little bit as well is we can play around finally in here also, if we like, just a little bit. So let's also do a quick thing here. Got some extra copies over here of things we've sort of shown as we've gone along. Let's just copy that over there so we've got it in backup as well. And then we're going to crop this one so we don't see any of those other notes anymore that we don't need. Loop it up, because what we might do as well is we might just play around also with just bringing it a little bit pluckier. Okay, decision made, we'll leave that as it is. And again, we're not using any presets here, so we've got a nice bass preset. We could come in here and switch it out now. We've just sort of started with a generic sort of Ableton analog here, so something like maybe this one. Or this one. Let's see. Not quite. I'm kind of preferring the one I had made myself at the moment. So let's go back to that for now. The one that I just sort of done with the analog. Okay, let's get a new MIDI track in. And let's get another, let's say, analog or wavetable in. And what we're going to try and do now is our melody to go with this. D Dorian, chord progression, bass line that's come from it. We're going back over the series of videos that I've done over the last few weeks, which was rhythm, bass, harmony, melody. Today we've looked a bit at harmonic rhythm, which we hadn't done previously. We're sort of paying attention to the fact that rhythm is so important. As I've been doing this series of videos, if there's one key thing that ties everything together, it's rhythm. Rhythm makes a difference to your melody, because a melody can stand out for its rhythm as much as it can for its pitch. And if you're not sure about that, go check out the previous video, which was melody, and I go and explore that in the melodic rhythm. Bassline 100%. Drums for sure, and even now you can see your chords and chord progression. If we don't want them to be kind of boring and static and all playing at the same time, if we create a bit of rhythm in our chords where they change, so they don't change on beat but they change in little sections of the chords, then we can get really interesting things going on. I just realized I had the wrong pattern looped up as well. So just changing these chords here, instead of on beat, as we're on beat, this chord is on beat, this chord is on beat, this chord and this chord, they change with a bit of rhythm. Chopping the chords up gives us a bit of rhythm, right? Okay, so new MIDI track. We're going to copy the bass down. And as I was sort of doing that bass rhythm, I kind of felt like in here, we discovered by playing around here some motifs, these little patterns that are sort of appearing around the place here. I kind of feel there could be a melody in there. So let's do that. We're going to use the bass now that's got a rhythm. It's got kind of an interesting pattern, the way it works with the chords down below. So this could be an option for us. Select all the notes. Let's get it up higher. Okay. And then what we're going to do is just isolate a couple of these motives. So we're going to start with those. So we're going to sort of pick out little patterns that are sort of appearing, and not too much of the notes that are playing all the same, but these little patterns that are kind of appearing, and they might make for interesting little motifs as a simple melody, let's say, that has come out of the bass work. Right, so that's interesting to me, to my ear. And you could do things like maybe you kind of loop something up here and you have those repeating a bit more, like a little bit like a sequence. But I also thought it was interesting what was just happening, and what we could do is kind of join these sections up a bit so they come together a bit. So I'm just kind of using a bit of the bass as an idea to kickstart a bit of a melody. Sticking to notes in the key. Nice. So if we take out the pads, so let's develop our melody synth a little bit. So what this is kind of interesting about is, like we sort of saw that with the previous videos, you don't have to start with a chord progression. We did do that today. We've got this chord progression, okay? We've actually got 8 bars worth, as I said, but we've kind of ended up just simplifying it a bit to 4 bars for a moment so we can kind of crack on with the stream. But we have an 8-bar chord progression and we could have an 8-bar bass line. So again, I'm just going to crop this so that we can remove the stuff we're not working with for now, keeping it nice and simple. Made a mistake there. Had a few of those creeping in today. Sorry about that. Okay, try that again. That's better. Okay, so there's our chord progression we're working with. I've done a bass line that sort of, I've flipped the chords. So just a little recap. I used Ableton Live to help me basically copy the chord progression down, and then I went and inverted it, and the bass line follows the opposite kind of direction, contrary motion it's called in music, to what's going up here in the chords. The chords kind of go up and then down a bit, and the bass kind of goes the opposite way. It goes down then up. So that was interesting. Then we've kind of carved out a melody out of the bass notes, the chord notes, and we've used some chord notes and we've used other notes that are in the scale but not in the chords. So we've got a mixture of chord tones and passive notes which are in the scale. We don't have anything that's out of the scale, but we could also do that as well for a bit more spice. And now I've copied that bass because it's more like a melody. It's developed little motives in here, and I kind of wrote myself a message today: motive hunting. Anytime we kind of see little things like that popping up, we might see a little pattern like that. Many a tune, Daft Punk, I referred to them a fair bit on this channel. You know, they were great at taking something like a little motive like that and building, you know, a whole kind of melody out of that. And so that's where we're at here at the moment, where we've got this new kind of track coming together. Of this wavetable, which is now got the bass line copied up, obviously some octaves higher, and I've sort of brought out some of those little motives and added a few little notes to kind of connect the dots between them a little bit. So similarly to the bass, we can play around with note lengths in here. Yeah, the envelope of the synth's really plucky, so I'll just show you that. We need to open up the decay a bit if we want those longer notes, right? So that's the advantage of making the sounds yourself. It's a quick adjustment. And if we put some effects on this melody a little bit, we can fill up that silence with a delay and a bit of reverb. try our bass 1 octave lower. It's a bit too low. But we can pitch it down maybe in the synth a bit. Yeah, because I think with the bass notes, they don't really work with the current synthesizer too low. So they're better as not a mid bass, but a little bit up as the current, yeah, this analog, and where the notes are, they fit better as in this range. But we can certainly darken our bass. Try a melody even higher. Like in this range. So let's say we were doing a bit of Daft Punk-esque, taking those motives, because they're still in their sort of they're still in their kind of bass line copied up with a little bit of work on them. If you were Daft Punk, you might sort of take something like this theme over here, perhaps. Like I was saying, let's loop that theme up for a second, this little kind of pattern. Let's try the other themes. Let's make it an even 1 or 2 bars. Which I think these two do the best over here. So let's say we sort of chose this pattern here in our idea, Daft Punk-esque, still working on the melody, taking a motive that we explored and found in the bass line. Let's change the color of this clip so we know it's a bit different. Let's crop out this 1 bar with that pattern like that. And then we're going to sort of duplicate it a bit. So we're going to get back maybe 4 bars like so. And then if we're Daft Punk, what we might be doing is kind of like, again, let's say we put a bit more shape into this. So we sort of contour the melody a bit and we rise and fall with the melody, keeping the same motive, but kind of bringing it into a bit of a different pattern that, as I said, kind of rises and falls with the same pattern. Now, right now, I'm not really paying attention to the notes being in key. I'm just basically making a little shape in my head sort of thing, quite random. We're getting a rising and falling sort of action. And then what I would do is make sure these notes are available to us in the scale. We could try notes outside of the scale, but now I'm going to make sure that what I'm working with is in scale. We could also do a little bit like the bass. Let's try it like this first, but we can also do some flipping of the notes. So again, we could go over here and invert them. That could be really nice. So let's say here we have an inversion of what we've got. And again, now we're in scale, right? And so we're just kind of trying out something a little bit different with the melody over here. We have something that works, but we're trying something else out here. So yeah, maybe this kind of inversion, we again pull out the inversion over here, right? And all currently in scale now. So let's check that. So all these notes are in our D Dorian, and we've got this kind of little sequence going, and we've got this rising and falling motive that's turned into a pattern. And then I'm just going to maybe tweak it slightly. So another way to approach that, right? So again, it was the bass line that sort of was the first working of the chords. It's given us some interesting little motives or little patterns that showed themselves up as I started to work and move things around out of the chord tones. And now I've kind of got two versions where I've kind of tweaked the bass pattern a bit here, left lots of space, used some of the motives, and now I'm creating a new kind of sequence out of them a little bit with a contour of this rising and falling. But again, the motive of the bass lines kind of brought me here. I kind of like things like that. Let's add just a bit of a sub bass into the bass patch, so that'll help kind of give it a little bit more depth in the lowness. We try this faster and slower. Let's see what it sounds like if we go up in the BPM. Let's do a shootout. So that's the original kind of melody written from the bass the motives that come out of the bass. Now we've got this sequence idea. I think that one's more interesting for me. I think that's really, you know, giving it the rising and falling contour of the sequence. So again, we can put that in the bank and say, great, we could use both. So everywhere we're kind of developing ideas, don't delete them. Maybe you decide to use that as an intro section of your arrangement. Maybe you can think of all the alternatives that we've come up with along the way here. They could be section B, and we're working in section A over here, right? And so we're making a B to our A. I think in the future, if you'd like to see a video on it, let me know. But I was thinking to make a video all about form and variations, so that we kind of do this similar to today, but we work on A, B, and building our this is our A section of our track, and here's our B, and then we could do a C, and then we bring all those forms together. So maybe if that's something you'd like to see, drop a comment on the video if you're watching back on replay, or let me know in the comments live in the stream here if you like. It's a bit quiet today, but I'm sure you're all enjoying your weekends. So if you do watch this back on replay, hope you find it useful, beneficial, all those good things. Today it's just a bit of a recap of the whole series of music theory for electronic music producers, where we've done bass, rhythm, sorry, then bass, then harmony, then melody. Okay, sip of my tea. Right, so back into this loop that we've got. Yeah, the bass, the synth sound itself needs some work. As I said, we were looking a bit before for a good preset, but we don't want to spend too much time on it. But maybe we can find one that just highlights it a little bit better. Stick our analog in a rack, and then we could always return to it. That works. And we can also take our very groovy bass, which isn't competing, but it's nearly competing, and we can come back. I think I've got an option of that bass, but just in case, we can do it again. This is actually how we started. We copy the chords down to the bass track, and then we bounce those chords down to sort of like a bass octave down here, and then we took out the notes of the chord that we were not going to use. We're just sort of following that contour shape there of the root notes, the chords. And then what we did was we used invert over here. And so what that does is actually flips the chords and means that the bass line's following, it's doing the opposite thing to the chords. It's called contrary motion. A bit of a Giorgio Moroder sort of style bass. If we change it to eighth notes here and slice it up, so let's change our grid, select all the notes. So this could quickly become like a typical offbeat bass, where we take away lots of the on beats. I think that fits the genre a little bit easier. And then we can spice it up a little bit here in some places. Just for a bit of variation, right? Just a quick pause here, having a look. Dr. Bones has dropped something in the chat. Could you keep the chords on the bass and arpeggiate them so they play individually? That's a great thing. I like your creativity there. You could, yeah. Nothing really to say that you couldn't. We can do that if you like, simulate that. Definitely you would want to arpeggiate them, because yeah, otherwise it's going to sound very messy and yeah, not very nice. But I think looking back at some of the things we're trying to kind of work on a bit today, and that is kind of one of the things we're seeking a lot when we're doing what we're doing sort of today is complementary, not competing. That is, the previous bass, which is really groovy and rhythmical, probably might work in a better in another genre. It does work here. very rhythmical and groovy. That might go better in a housey sort of track. But it's led to good things as well, because creating that bass from the chords and doing the same thing, inverting it, but changing the patterns around and using some of the notes in the scale outside the chord gave me my melody, which is great. So it's not been a wasted exercise. It never is. And we can maybe again use that in a different section of the song. But I think maybe a simpler bass like this actually is more complementary. Hey Adrian Dantas, good afternoon to you. Hope you're well. So let's do Bones's idea there, and let's bring the chords down, drop them in there, bring them down an octave or two, and let's say we go for an arpeggiated bass. So again, this would be, it's a really great creative kind of thought that Bones has had there. And what I would probably do as well is I would arpeggiate it, but I'd also capture what's going to happen. So I wouldn't plonk the arpeggio on there and say job done. I'd probably print some of the MIDI that we might get from that and work from there. So if we stick an arpeggio in front of our bass instrument and the chords are down lower in the second octave, we're going to get this. And then we can start looking for a better pattern to start with. Change our rhythm. Spice it up maybe a little bit. Try a bit of swing. So what I would probably do with that, I think that's already a decent sort of starting point. And again, we can also just make sure here we put it in our D Dorian scale in case we do anything kind of fancy. But what I'd start doing now is I'd actually set up this MIDI track over here to start grabbing the results of what we're doing. So let's route the bass, and we should name things a little bit here. So let's do that. Bass, this is our current bass track here. This is our chord progression for today, which is in D Dorian. We're looking for a sort of hopeful but melancholic kind of chords progression. That's what we're doing there. This over here is our current melody, inspired a bit by Daft Punk, those good chaps. Found a motive and we've kind of made a nice pattern out of it, a bit like what we're going to end up with here in the bass. So this is another way to kind of develop that. So on this track, we're going to bring it in. We're going to listen to the bass. We're going to arm it to record into there and capture the notes. But what we kind of want to do as well, this is what I generally would do with something like this also, is I'm going to do a little bit of extra routing to do what I'm going to do here. So what we're going to do, because otherwise we're just going to be getting the actual chords printing again, which is not what we're looking for here. We want some really nice MIDI. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the arpeggio and we're going to shift that off, put it over on the MIDI track over here, and we're going to call this the MIDI bus. Okay, and that's going to send the MIDI to the bass track. Okay, so got to keep an eye out on this a little bit. We've separated the arpeggio, put it on its own MIDI track. We're now sending that over, right? And we're going to change things around a bit. This is no longer going to be an in track. It's a MIDI track with the ARP, and it's sending the MIDI to the bass track. We can arm it in a second. Let's just say we might have to just change that. There we go. Take off solo, take it off of in just to auto. That'll be fine. Okay, let's hit play again. So we don't hear anything just yet. Let's do that. And now we're going to move our bass notes over here. So on bass over here, take away the chords. So this takes a little bit of steps here. I know I've kind of gone off down a tangent here, but there we go. So what we've now got is the ARP and the chords over on their own empty MIDI track, and they're sending that information to the bass track, which means in theory, if we start now recording on the bass track, it's also armed, ready to record. Let's see, hopefully now we get the arpeggio notes, right? That's what we're kind of looking for here. Hang on. Whoa, hold up. Okay, so this one we want in. Okay, let's try that again. Oh, we're still losing our chords here, so we don't want that. Shouldn't actually be happening now that we've got this guy on, but let's just make sure. So try a little bit more here. There we go. So now we're getting our ARP finally into here, the notes of the ARP. So let's now show you a little trick. This all came from Dr. Bones. Hopefully he's enjoying this little breakdown here, but it was a good idea. We could indeed use the chord progression, arpeggiate it, and get some notes. That could bring us our bass line, and it could also bring us our melody. So what we're going to do, as I said, this little workflow we've got here, I think it's easier to see in the session view. We've got a MIDI track that was empty. We put an arpeggiator on there. It's routed in the in-outs to the bass track where we have our synth, okay? And we've copied the chord progression to the empty MIDI track, to the MIDI bus. That's important as well because it's bringing the MIDI notes, it's arpeggiating, the chords are happening on that MIDI bus track, and they're then being sent to the bass instrument. And on the bass track, we can kind of record the results of that, which is what we're going to be doing now. And what that means is we can go over to the ARP, and if you're playing this on the keyboard, this is also a lot of fun. You can hit hold here, and then you can start. But what we might do, just before we do that, so let's go back a few steps. Let's just Command Z our way back to where we were, because what we're going to do is going to make some space for this. And we're going to, let's maybe say, duplicate a track down. Lose all of this stuff from over here. Put this one back to a normal track. Lose all this stuff from over here. And now lose that as well. So that what we're going to do is end up with a nice long recording into this bass clip here of the arpeggio. And let's try that again now. Give a little lead up to it. Because now we can mess around with all of this. In real time. We could probably maybe switch off a few things, but what we should have now, just as a rough guide there, is everything that we were just capturing, right? When I started to mess around in real time, changing the steps of the ARP and the timing of it, we get all this beautiful MIDI over here. And the idea behind that is, again, if we come back to earlier in the piece and looking at some notes for today, and we're looking to be motive hunting, well, hopefully you can see now, by doing that little experiment that Dr. Bones has kind of led us to, and if we drag this out, you know, it goes a long way. You can kind of get rid of this bit here. You can make sure that the start of your recording and the end of it is everything, but I've kind of looped it inside there as well, right? So it's looped kind of from here. So technically it's a bigger loop, it goes all the way over to there. So as you can see, it kind of starts from somewhere. So if you pull this out, So it just depends where you want to be, but it's all captured up here. But I think if we go straight to making a small loop in it, like somewhere here, just a quick one, bring this all into where we're working, that will help as well. So we've got this selection of notes, right? And if we make it one bar, like so, so now it's matching, and we could even put it starting on a bar if you like, just like so. We could now go motive hunting, right? So we've got all this kind of stuff in here, and maybe in here straight away you kind of get in here and you take out a bunch of notes and you're looking for a little pattern, and I'm just going to use my eyes here, right? And maybe it's that little pattern there in combination with something else. So something like that, perhaps. But we need to make sure now we're going to turn off our previous bring in a few more notes. So quite rough and ready, but you get the idea, hopefully, that you can go hunting in there and there'd be lots of motives, and we could have kept that recording going for a long, long old time and generate all that MIDI, and then there's lots and lots of like creative inspiration in here that you can come in and, as I said, maybe find your bass sequence in there or pattern. So the idea from Dr. Bones of, you know, copying a chord progression down and then arpeggiating it, so hopefully I answered the question. Routing and recording's an extra step, but you end up with this pretty cool kind of result that's going on over here. So let's get back on track a wee bit and just clean up things a second here, because I reckon we've got time just to add in a little bit more detail. So what we'll do is we'll just take those two tracks, put them out of the way. I have a feeling I might have lost my eighth nose bass. Maybe not. Hopefully I was smart and copied it over. We're about to find out. I think I did. Okay, so this is what we had so far. Make sure we turn off our other external noises. Now we're sort of back a little bit on track. Let's have a look at these chords. We could try these chords lower. Yeah, down there I think's nice. They're not treading on the bass too much. So let's maybe try out some other synths here, just so we can try something else. Try also half timing this. Not going to work, that's fine. So this could also be a faster bass if we want. It could be 16th notes in here as opposed to eighths. So if we sort of like slice it one more here, this will work. So maybe with our D Dorian and our chord progression that's kind of led us to all the other parts of today, so doing a recap and a live sort of video where we're sort of focusing on all the parts of the series that I've done this beginner friendly series on music theory for electronic producers. There's a playlist on my channel. I'll link it to the end of today's video, where you can see me work through rhythm on its own, then bass on its own, then harmony on its own, then melody on its own. We've also now looked a little bit at harmonic rhythm and melodic rhythm, which are key. And again, I've banged on about it a little bit, but the key thing that actually really makes a lot of difference to the music and is a pain point for many in all of this, when you're doing all this music theory and all these melodies and harmonies and basses, is rhythm. Because not only pitch matters, and having, you know, notes that move around in keys and scales and up and down in pitch and all those good things, the rhythm can stand on its own. You can identify a piece of music just in its rhythm, even if you level out the pitches. So that's something to really work on, because that will separate your, you know, music. And in the melody video, I did an example of that with the Darth Vader March. And there's a guy who, I think it's Chris Mickelson, that I'll see if I can find it and drop the link in the chat, where he goes deeper into that. And he just shows that if you play it on the keyboards, you know, you can hear the Imperial March, and it just doesn't work if you take away the rhythm. It's all the rhythm that makes you go, ah, that's that tune, right? So keep that in mind. All right, so let's see if we can just add a chord step maybe. So let's stay in D Dorian, chord 1 is a minor, D minor. So let's say we give it a quick, nothing too fancy. Again, we're just going to use a raw instrument of Ableton. So now it would be on beat, if it's there, perhaps not on beat. We could try out the B is a bit of a tense chord, so if we tried the B diminished, maybe that would be interesting as a really tense stab against the pretty stuff we've got going on elsewhere, right? So B is one chord we could try. That's a diminished chord, the diminished chord in the scale. C is major, G is major, F is major, A is minor, so this one also would be a bit tenser against what else we have. So D is minor. Yeah, I think A minor could be nice. Could have this kind of nice dubby kind of chords perhaps. So just making a separate little bit of dub chords here that I'm sort of joining together. So getting a little bit of rhythm into those, making them, building them out of the scale, being aware that we looked at right back in our very beginning of chord progression making, right over here. We zoom out. There's all the chords we have in our D Dorian. It's always good to sort of know that. So we've got minor in the D, minor in the E, major in the F, major in the G, minor in the A, diminished in the B. So if we're looking to kind of make tense or moody or kind of chords, stabs that might go with everything else that we've got. We've got our progression, we built that, we've built a bass, we've built a melody, then we can play around with those different chords on their own, and they could also be voiced differently, which is kind of what I did here. So the voicing is normally there, but I was kind of making this into an F actually. So it was kind of an F chord, which is F major in the scale, and then I just revoiced it so it kind of comes back down into the space with these chords. We could also make them sevenths. We could have a ninth up here, so skip, play, skip, that would be up there, you know, make them different chords. Okay, lost my loop for a second. Let's put that back in. Let's change the rhythm of these a little bit. Nice. So we've got an extra little chord stab in there now. So coming together in the end, right? And it's sort of, you know, applying a bit of everything. So we've got today, our goal was to kind of write something that applied all the different sort of stages of the series of videos. So starting from scratch, we went for emotion. That was the thought today. We're going to make, because it kind of helps to have a track that has emotion so that we can kind of apply all these different elements. If we're making a minimal techno track or just a techno track or something else, we might go for, you know, a lot more stripped, and we might just have a great bass line and a great melody, or a great chords and a great bass line. Here we're kind of being a bit more ambitious. We're trying to get emotion into the music and have a few different elements that kind of bring together what we've been trying to do in the series. So we wrote this chord progression in D Dorian, voiced it a little bit differently. We've then sort of created a bass out of it that was very rhythmical and interesting, with motives that we might use, but we currently stripped it back down a bit to a more simple bass that's eighth notes, and it's following the opposite of the movement of the chords. So it's called contrary motion. So if we sort of lay all this over each other, should be able to see what's going on, right? So this is what's going on, and now we've added a final layer to that, right? So what we're doing here is kind of spreading, we could spread things out further. So the highest we've got is the octave of 3 to 4. So the melody could go up higher potentially, or these chords. I do like the pads. So the actual chord progression is close to the bass. The bass is the orange down here. The purple or violet is the main chord progression. You can see the stab chords overlap, and the melody dances in and around it. And I think that's the key thing. So, and the bass moves opposite to the chords. You see how it goes down when the chords go up. So that's all the things we've sort of put into the video today, is playing around with that. And if we're worried that everything's on top of each other, we can spread it out further. That's in another video on the channel. You know, common things to look, common mistakes to look out for is sort of squeezing everything into the same space. So what I mean by that, you know, we could experiment with the melody track up here. Hi, Miri. Hope you're welcome. Hope you're well, and you're very, very welcome. Thank you for being here with me. So if we take the melody here and we put it up an octave, you know, now we separate what we just looked at, you know, so we can use our eyes, but also our ears kind of tell us generally these clashes as well. And we're looking for not too many clashes. You can see now we've spread it out further, right? Oops, wrong button. Okay, let's try that again. Just get one of them open. There you go. So now you've got more distance between everything. That might be the answer. We could reverse the stabs so they're out the way. They don't all have to play at the same time either, but they are. And for me, they're not competing too hard. That melody's too high for me, so my decision with that is to put it back, right? So like I said, maybe your tune kind of starts out like this. And then you come into a nice break. And you start to work a bit on your arrangement. And maybe in here, the melody doesn't play when the stab chords play. So they dance around each other a bit more. And you can start working like that, right? So they don't all have to play together, but it's nice to kind of have a foundation. I do like to kind of create a foundation where they could all work together, and then you have the choice and the option to, you know that they could all be playing together at the peak perhaps, and everything's happening and it's fitting together. That also works quite nicely. And then we can play around with our instruments as well. And get more into the patches and more into the sound and everything. So on that note, it's going to be a wrap for today. And as I said, it is the last one of the series of this beginner friendly series on music theory for electronic music. I'm sure I'll be back to revisit the topic. There's always things to learn, there's always things to develop, and if you'd like to see some more advanced kind of concepts to add on to these, we could definitely roll out some videos on that. For now, I wanted to make that series beginner friendly, and hopefully you find all the different videos on the different sections interesting, helpful, and all the reasons that I'm kind of sharing the content, help a lot of these pain points I've been through myself, so I'd like to help you overcome those. So let's just keep in mind that rhythm is super important. Too much repetition, not enough variation. Too much variation's a problem. The balance between repetition and variation in whatever you're doing, your melodies, your basses, your chords, your progressions, all elements playing the same pattern. We don't really want static or boring, stuck in the loop. I think we should do a video at some point, as I said, that expands on this A, B, B, C, A, B, all the different variations that we could use on what we've sort of come up with, and then make it, you know, different forms and patterns. That will help us get out of, you know, static and boring and stuck in a loop. Don't overthink things. Don't worry too much about sound design if you're doing things like this at the beginning. Sometimes you could do that, there's no rules, but you know, maybe just try and see if it sounds good on a piano before you start switching it to all the good sort of instruments and presets and stuff. So that's going to be a wrap. I'm going to wish you a great rest of your weekend. I will for sure put a link to the playlist at the end here that I would highly recommend if you've enjoyed this video to watch that series back and the rest of the series in case you've missed it. If you'd like to see something special on the channel, a certain theme, genre, a particular thing, do drop a comment and let me know. I'm reading all those and I'm very interested to know, you know, about other directions that we can take the channel and the videos. Someone asked for a Q&A recently. That could be fun to do, so why not program that in at some point. And as I said, as always, have a awesome rest of your weekend. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And if you, you know, want to see more content like this, I actually write a newsletter. It comes out every 2 weeks. It's called Thinking Aloud. I'll put a link in the description below, but it's for DJs, producers, artists, electronic music crew, and it's full of tips and tricks and probably interesting discussions similar to the videos. So if you fancy having a newsletter dropping in your inbox where we can exchange these ideas and learning, then check out the links below in the description and jump on board grabbing yourself a copy of the Thinking Aloud newsletter. That's it for today. Take care, everybody. Keep on creating, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everybody. Ciao for now.